in a moment. We're going to talk about what I mean by living purposefully and what that kind of means in this current context we find ourselves in. We're going to do an activity by ourselves to look at values, and I'm going to lead a short kind of meditation to ground us for that, and then we're going to explore by ourselves what are our values. And for some people that might be connecting with values that they actually already feel really connected to, and that's a really easy question to answer. And for some of us that might be like, I don't even know where to begin with that, and that's absolutely fine. Don't worry about wherever you are in relationship to thinking about your values. We're going to do some reflection in small groups, and then we're going to come back together and think about how we can take away some of the learning and insight that we get today to continue to kind of help us and serve us in the coming weeks. Does that sound okay? Can I get a thumbs up? Awesome, thank you so much. I'm sure for any of you who've been running sessions online, it's really weird sometimes, that sense of like, is anyone actually there? Is maybe the video's just frozen and I think they're smiling, but actually their internet connection's died. So it's really great to get that feedback. Thank you. So first things first, what I'd love you to do is just to pop in the chat box for now. So you should find that at the bottom of your screen along where you've been finding the emojis. I'd love to know, where are you in the world? I think we're all in the UK, but it'd be great to hear where you are. How are you in terms of a weather report? So if you were going to describe how you're doing today as if it was a weather report, how would you be? Would there be a looming storm? Would you be feeling sunny and bright? And then one wish you have for the session. So I'm just going to give you a few moments to do that. So let's move on then to think a little bit about purpose and what it means to connect with a sense of purpose. I want to tell you briefly a bit more about Project Wayfinder, who, as I mentioned, are an organisation. They're based in the States, but they work globally, and I work with them here in Europe. And you can think of Project Wayfinder as a movement, but also kind of like a philosophy for living a life that feels full of meaning and purpose. And they do this in a number of ways. They work with schools, they work with young people, but we also work with adults as well. So last year I was running a programme of kind of purpose learning for a group of adults here in London. So although predominantly we work with young people, I'd say it's something for everyone really. And the whole Wayfinder philosophy and this way of thinking about purpose is inspired by traditional wayfinders. Don't worry if you haven't heard of wayfinding. I hadn't before I came to Project Wayfinder a few years ago. Some of you might know Moana, who is probably Disney's finest wayfinder. And the traditional wayfinders are essentially traditional navigators who use the natural world to help themselves travel, to help themselves get from A to B. So they literally do things like use the currents in the ocean, they look at the birds in the sky and work out the distances they're at from the shore, they use the stars as a compass point to help them navigate. And so this kind of idea of traditional wayfinding, traditional navigation is a really helpful backdrop for thinking about purpose, because it's really linked to respecting the earth. And actually, if we're going to live with purpose and meaning, we need to be living in alignment with the planet that we find ourselves on. And then also thinking about the interconnectedness of nature and people. So traditional wayfinders will think about connecting to the land, to the people who they find themselves with, which is very much how we think about purpose and meaning. And then that idea of connecting with what feels like a sense of wonder in your heart, what helps you to feel curious. So we're going to be getting really curious today when we explore our values. And lastly, that idea of a deep respect for generations, both before and after us. So that idea of connecting to values isn't like a new age thing. It's been done for generations and generations. So let's learn from the wisdom from people previous to us. So traditional wayfinding is like the backdrop, the metaphor for how we'll be talking about values and purpose today. And I'm really happy to share more about that towards the end if anyone's got any questions. So the last thing to say about purpose is that it brings together a few different things. Purpose we describe as having a why, so knowing why you're doing something, and that why being deeply rooted in your values, it having benefits beyond the self, and also being personally meaningful. So being purposeful, not just being about something that matters to you and that feels important to you, but that also has consequence beyond you. And similarly, even if it has consequence beyond you, if it doesn't matter to you as well, then it isn't going to feel deeply purposeful. So we talk about purpose as bringing together deep-rooted values, something that has benefit beyond you, but that also matters to you. Making sense so far? Wicked, thanks for the thumbs. So when we support young people or educators to think about this at Project Wayfinder, we focus on a few different things. That why that I just mentioned. We support people to think about their identity. So think about who they are, where they come from, to connect to a sense of joy, what feels joyful, to think about what they're good at, your strengths, and then finally thinking about values. And that's where we're going to come to today, really thinking about what it looks like to live in alignment with our values and what it feels like when actually there's disalignment, sometimes without misalignment, not disalignment, I just made up a word. Thinking about when things are outside of our control, like right now with this global situation we find ourselves in, there will be instances of misalignment in our values. And how do we navigate that? How do we pass through that in a way that causes minimum harm to ourselves and others? So there's a question on the screen here, and I'm going to put you in breakout rooms shortly. So I'm going to give you a second just to read this. What's the biggest challenge you are currently facing around feeling purposeful or feeling connected to your values, and what's helping? So in a moment, I'm going to put you into breakout rooms, and what I'd love you to explore is how easy is it to feel connected to your values right now, and how hard is it? What's helping you to feel connected and what's getting in the way? And I'm just going to give you sort of 5 minutes or so to discuss that in small groups, and then we're going to come back together. And obviously, if you are in a group with people that you don't know, which I think will be the case for most of us, take a minute to say hi and introduce yourselves first. Does that sound okay? Yeah? Everyone understand? Awesome. And so I suppose the hope today is that in taking this time out to connect with your values and to really connect with yourself a little bit in a kind of contained way, hopefully we can think about some ways that some of that can be enabled and we can be helping to feel more purposeful, even without some of the things that normally ground us in that sense of self and, feeling connected to our values. So when I was preparing for this session, I asked some people what they thought about values in relation to lockdown, and some of the kind of the comments I got were, I'm going to put on the screen now. One friend said to me, I don't have time to think about my values, I've got 2 children under 2. Someone else said, my values are bound up in how I serve others and I can't see anyone, which resonates with Martin, what you were just saying then. I value connection, but I feel completely overloaded by Zoom. So actually that sense of how do we connect now, and is that nourishing for us, or is it not? And that sort of sense of guilt, sort of being torn between feeling that you want to contribute, but also feeling guilty that actually I know for some people they've been enjoying this time, they've been enjoying the space that they've got. So different kind of emotions and feelings around values in relation to this current time. So we are going to move now into an activity to help us connect with our sense of values. And what I'm going to do at this point is just do a really short meditation. And what I'm going to invite you to do is to turn your cameras off for this so that you've got a bit of space. You can just listen. You don't have to do anything. If you want to think about where your feet are touching the ground, that can be a nice way to ground yourself. But I'm just essentially going to read a short meditation to help us kind of orientate ourselves before we move into the activity. So I'm going to invite you to start by taking a breath. In order to be purposeful navigators in our lives, we first start with ourselves. We ask, what do I value? What matters to me? We can only get to know ourselves if we're paying close attention, this next few moments is an invitation to pay close attention. Bring your attention to the sounds you hear around you. What is the furthest sound that you can hear? What is the closest sound you can hear? Notice if you started to name the sounds as they come up. The clock, my partner, traffic. It's completely natural for our brains to do this. We hear sounds and we label them straight away. Now let's experiment with paying attention to the quality of the sounds that we can hear, to the texture, without labeling them. If your mind starts to wander, that's totally normal. You're not doing anything wrong. Just see if you can gently bring your attention back. Bring your attention now to the sound of your breath. You may not even have noticed you were breathing, but we're breathing all the time. It's just a matter of bringing our attention to it. You might want to bring a hand to your chest or to your belly. And just feel the rise and fall of the breath. See if you can feel one breath from the beginning to the end. If memories, plans, or emotions arise, just gently bring your attention back. Don't judge it. The moment you realize you've been distracted is the most important part of the practice. It's the moment we have the opportunity to choose to be kind to ourselves. And that's the practice. Choosing over and over again to gently return to the breath without judgment. Whenever you feel ready, gently open your eyes and come back into the Zoom room. You might want to invite yourself to have a little stretch. I can see some of you doing that. So just have a little stretch to wake up your body and return back into the room. Hopefully that felt like a nice pause moment. I really enjoyed the fact that Sue's cat got involved. Sue's cat was loving the meditation, which I really, really appreciated. Didn't know that cats got into meditation, but I rate that. Fantastic. So I'm going to share my screen with you again, and we're going to move on to an activity to help us think about our values. So I'm going to put on the screen lots of different words to describe values. And all I want you to do is to write down the ones that resonate for you. There's no right or wrong. There might be words up there, there might not be words up there that actually feel important to you in terms of your values. So if you have got something in your head that's missing from the list, that's fine, you can write that down. I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to do this. It's quite a long list. So all you have to do is write down any of the words that resonate for you. Okay, so what we're going to do with our list, yeah, nice one, however many words we've got to, is you're going to look at the ones you've written down and you're going to start to group them. So I'll just show you briefly my list. So as you can see here, I looked at the ones I'd written down and I thought, how might I group these together? And then I gave each group a kind of overarching name. So you can see I had things like community, inclusiveness, awareness, commitment, and I decided to call that group of words I'd written down community. So where you want to get to is to have your words grouped into categories that resonate for you. So as you can see, I ended up with community, skill, nature, learning, connection. And not all of my words fitted in. So like I felt like there was something around moving my body that I hadn't quite captured. So don't worry about it too much, don't overthink it. But the idea here is that you're beginning to notice how the words you've written down might be grouped and organised. So I'm going to give you another few minutes to do that. Okay, so we've begun to explore words that might resonate for us in terms of values, and we've begun to think about how we might organise them and label them. And again, don't worry if you didn't complete it. This is really just about beginning to explore and be curious about some of those words that resonate for us. And the question then is, of course, how alive do those values feel right now? Which ones are we embodying? Which ones feel in misalignment? And I'm just going to briefly share what I'm connecting to in terms of my own values before I give you some space to explore this with each other. So I thought about the way I'd group my values, as you saw a moment ago, and I thought actually community, nature and connection probably feel more alive for me right now than they do normally, because I've been involved in the local mutual aid movement in my area. I've been going for really lovely walks by the canal. There was a really great duck in that picture, which I'm really sad has been cut off because you guys are not going to get to see the duck, but just imagine it in your head, it was really great. And also, you know, I'm feeling probably more connected to my family than I do normally. This picture is of my grandma's 95th birthday. This is her in the middle here, and she has absolutely nailed Zoom and WhatsApp. It's such an inspiration. So I'd never normally speak to her every week, but you know, I'm actually feeling quite connected. Whereas if I look at kind of skill and learning, for me, a really big part of my values is feeling connected to my work and feeling that I have something to offer and I'm using my skills and I'm learning all the time. And that's all been stripped away because all of my work got cancelled. And I'm self-employed. So I've had to sort of really look again at, okay, how am I creating my work? How am I creating that sense of identity without that? So for me, some aspects are feeling more alive and some I'm having to really think about and notice, okay, that might be why I'm feeling a bit, you know, in misalignment, why I'm feeling a bit kind of down sometimes is because those things aren't alive for me right now. And I'm sure for some of you, there'll be a similar split. So what we're going to do now is we're going to move back into breakout groups. I think I will probably do the same groups if I can, so that you can continue to connect with the same people. And I'm going to give you a good 15 minutes to do this in your groups, but just to really, don't worry about remembering too much what's on the screen. The invitation really is just to share with each other what's come up for you through doing that activity. What are you noticing? What insights are you kind of harvesting through taking a moment out to consider what your values might be, and how are you feeling about that in relation to what's in your world right now? So you can take the conversations in different directions depending on what you're feeling, but it's just an opportunity to share and connect with each other as a result of having these conversations. Does that sound okay? Yeah. So I'm going to put you into breakout groups, and then we're going to come back at 1:45 so that we can close the session and share some reflections before we finish. All right. And I would invite you all to think about who you can replicate this with. So you've just taken part in this activity. There'll be a list of values shared after this. So, think about who you might want to set up a Zoom call with to do the same thing. And so extend that even further so we feel this ripple effect of that experience you've had today.